Hi. Hope you all have a lot of water lying around, because I think between my talk and potentially Ryan's, we're going to have a lot of Node mentioned. So anyway, hello. This is Merge Conflict Resolution and Management for Developers. As they said, I'm Tracy Hinds. I'm Platform Manager and International Operations at Samsung Next by day. By all other hours, I'm working on Node in the community and a cat herder of conferences and a nonprofit Gather Script by most other hours. You can find me on GitHub and Twitter and the far corners of the internet as Hacky Go Lucky. And I just want to say thanks for being here and listening to me for a few minutes about some of this stuff. A disclaimer. I am not a licensed psychotherapist. My undergraduate education was a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology and sociology. But what that mostly means is that I spent 4 years trying to diagnose myself with some disorder. I'm trained in crisis counseling as well as peer mediation conflict management. I've also had experience in practicing that. But this talk is not a substitution for going and getting trained yourself and being supervised by licensed experts to teach you how to execute on some of these lessons. But we're going to talk about all of that today in the talk. As the education community manager of Node, and now on the moderation team, I'm leading the conflict management training program for Node leadership and collaborators. And those are the folks who keep the project ticking for the millions of users. We're going to walk through applying that education to open source developers distributed across the globe and report in on removing barriers to stability through improving developer productivity with healthy communication and collaboration as peer conflict management. So back when programmers were running tests and prepping for the Y2K bug, and GDPR was a millennial lifetime away, my middle school leaders found themselves at an impasse with a pretty impossible challenge on their hands. Tons of fights and lots of physical violence was going on. I went to public school, and students were pouring into the guidance counselor with what seemed to the adults to be really small arguments and mostly fueled by puberty. Long dismissing those problems, they finally agreed to bring in an experiment, and that was a peer mediation program. Every student in the school was required to take the training. A room, a space for the peer mediation, was dedicated. A teacher was only in there to sit and watch and stay quiet. The peers, we were required to visit and volunteer at the peer mediation classroom once a week as if it were study hall. So the guidance counselors and teachers were no longer breaking up the fights. They were teaching the teenagers, untrusting of outsiders to solve their problems, to learn the complexity of conflict, how to communicate what they are feeling, why they are feeling it, and to be able to calmly dialogue about their disagreements. And the occurrences of fighting dropped dramatically. So, someone you relate to, going through the same history quizzes and Algebra 2 exams, they don't look or act like you, but they have to make it to the other side just like you. Something hiding underneath the surface of this story is that we don't wake up having these tools to facilitate conflict naturally. It has to be cultivated as kids or even as adults. This is a gift given to me by my secondary education, and I thought that the training may translate to our distributed, much more online world if done with care. So we are programmers, but we're also human. And I get very, very fired up in debates. It feels good, even if only temporary, to think that you're right. When you've taken it too far, though, built up this idea of another person on the other side of the screen who's doing something so intentionally malicious, you're talking past each other. There's no understanding motivations. The words on your screen are just a surface layer of what's going on. So what is conflict? Conflict gets a really bad rap, but that's a bit unfair. It isn't inherently bad. Modern theories consider conflict a natural and inevitable outcome of human interaction. Conflict situations also often lead to the generation of new ideas and positive change. So that's a lot to unpack. Let's talk some approaches that we can use as instruments to put in our toolboxes to communicate a little more kindly in our everyday work. So the work we've done thus far with the Node moderation team has, through honing governance and taking a very deep look at what we need to change to modify behavior, incidentally mirrored what a Nobel Prize-winning economist Elinor Ostrom wrote of governance of the commons and evidence-based social design. Limit effects of bad behavior, and that's through moderation systems, making inappropriate posts less prominent, keeping consistent moderation policies, including community members in the moderation, offering reversion tools, and introducing filters. Limit bad behavior itself. You can do that through activity quotas, temporary or permanent bans, and consistent criteria for the bans outlined with process. Encourage voluntary compliance by ensuring that people learn the norms, showing examples of appropriate or inappropriate behavior, but not too often, and dwelling on it, displaying statistics on the normative behavior, and reminding people about the norms at the point of action. So with the advent of social coding through GitHub, online communities have broken down physical location differences and communication barriers, creating a new challenge with folks who are not employed by the same company, but collaborating on a common goal. The speed at which we pass both positive and negative information, it's a breakneck pace. So even if we were to be at the same company, a well-meaning manager, a very well-staffed HR firm, or internal team, they would have a hard time keeping up. So with volunteer contributing, as is much the way of many open source projects, attention and time are a very limited resource. Low quality contributions, such as commenting without seeking out some context prior, creates a social dilemma. These contributions drown out other contributions with time and emotional labor, and often exhaust the available attention. So conflict researchers have studied this, and the effects on closed source software development, at least, is easier to track. So Dr. Steve Sawyer surveyed 40 packaged software development teams and concluded that how people work together and mitigate conflict is more important than the individual skills and ability of the team's members in predicting their software developer performance. So, yeah. What do you think Node project activity looks like when we've ended up in big fights on Twitter? Or on long essays of debates going back and forth on GitHub, long derail the issue at hand. PRs and pushes drop to a crawl when comments shoot up. So we're makers, and there's no doubt we love to fix things, and we're paid to problem solve. But we can't fix them all, and we can certainly not do all of this good work alone. But we try through trial and error, in iterating over governance, moderation policies, in codes of conduct, and in values consensus. So, as moderators in open source, we lay the groundwork for participants to understand one another's perspectives. For a conflict management system to work, we had to establish that proper grounding first. We don't have to we don't have to agree to get along, but a common understanding and a value system context is important to effective interaction. So last year, the first thing that we did was meet as the top-level project committees, and we ran a core value session at Collaboration Summit. Even with its global impact, Node had relied on a very implicit understanding of community members' expectations. Core values serve as the boundaries within which an organization will operate in pursuit of its vision. Moving forward, we needed to codify expectations so that we could work effectively together and empower members to act in the best interest of a very global node. It was also vital that we address leadership guidelines in the project to model good behavior practices. So we created the member expectations file. It's important that members of our leadership group, that was the TSC Community Committee, also the members of the board, act in a way that not only complies with the Code of Conduct, but that models the vision, mission, and operating principles of the Node project that we're seeking. Cultural acceptance. So cultural elements underlying conflicts are a really important consideration we need to bear in mind, adding an extra edge and degree of sensitivity to the difficult tasks of mediation and peace building. This includes perception checking, how our own perception is affecting the conflict we're a part of, and what influences our mental programming has on how we are perceiving. Creative ways of handling conflicts often emerge from the adoption of a flexible, pragmatic outlook. In short, one size does not fit all. A nuanced approach to conflict through listening first, gaining context from parties, proceeding with care in the spaces, with which the parties feel comfortable often allow for early resolve instead of continued management. The tooling. So I'd be remiss to not dive in a bit into the tooling constraints that we as open source moderators of conflict have. Where do your communities live? For Node, we live on GitHub, we live on Twitter. We, in fact, for some time had a magnitude more tweets than the next most active programming language, Java. I'm not kidding or being hyperbolic. Node has grown up with GitHub. We've felt the pain of what it means to limit permissions of contributors for security's sake, and then moderators don't have access to act swiftly to edit or ban bad actors. We've also celebrated the awesome work they've done in recent years with incredible features giving the power to maintainers to better fine-tune permission, reduce noise, and ensure productive conversations through issue locking and user blocking, and being able to quickly apply community guidelines to a repo. And then there's scope. We had to take a step back and look at what spaces our ecosystem interacts in, but also what we have control over. We can work to improve the environment in GitHub because we control that space. We have the permissions and the administrative tools to do that. But what about Twitter, or Reddit, or Hacker News? We chose a strategy of tackling the scope we could commit to, ensuring safety and healthy dialogue in for moderation. So is GitHub, select Slack and IRC groups, and events. That can be tough when many of us have found subcommittees in these spaces that are really helpful. But we've spent a lot of time trying to help in these spaces, and we've ended up with overexposed and attacked community members. So the who. The Node moderation team. We have an elevated responsibility to observe patterns, audit processes, and draft new governance to improve our workspaces of the Node project. The top-level committees, the TSC, which is the Technical Steering Committee, and the Community Committee, are voting members who jointly select or object to any person on the moderation team. And the process verifies the shared trust project contributors have with those who are ended up selected. So let's be clear, though, as I move through these examples. And as I've said already, perspective is vital to being effective in these challenges, and we still lack in diversity on the moderation team. And I think that's echoed from much of the Node project, which also means that we have gaps in time zone coverage. We will never be as effective as a group when the makeup of our team doesn't mirror the makeup of the developer community we would like to see in Node. So this is an uphill battle worth fighting. As moderators, we respect that maintaining trust is key to being effective. In conflict management, we get to be the bridge builders, dispel skepticism and fear in place of an expectation of acting in good faith. We remove conflict barriers as facilitators of conversations. So now that we've got the who, what, and why, let's how. So anyone that wants to request moderation can do so. They do not have to be a member of our organization. Requesting moderation of a post can be accomplished in one of 4 ways. The first is to email to report@nodejs.org. The second is a private email to one of our moderation team members, which are listed in our README with their email and their full contact information. You can also file an issue in the same, a new post in the same thread as the post with the moderation request. We can also request moderation via a new issue in Node.js moderation repo. So collaborators can moderate non-collaborator posts at any time without submitting a request or getting a request by someone else. So this is because while we have a moderation team, anyone with a collaborator status is helping contribute to the values expressed through repeated interactions with participants. The moderation team helps set policy and modeling, but all collaborators can and will moderate or can and moderate by default. And we're going to talk a little later about how we're working to be intentional and better prepare all of those collaborators for this. So when a request is sent by email to report@nodejs.org or directly to a moderation team member, a new issue detailing that request has to be logged in Node.js/moderation. The identity of the individual submitting the request is omitted from the issue unless permission has been included. This brings us back to scoping the space for handling conflict to the space appropriate for it. When you're having a conflict with a coworker, does your manager or HR sit you down in an open office and try and talk to you about it? No. They generally take you into a more private setting where you can feel comfortable to talk candidly, but also gain perspective without feeling judged. Or feeling judged, but that's also easier to swallow in private. The moderation repo is a private repo, but everyone who is a collaborator, who is an engaged, active participant in the project, has permission to view and interact on these threads. Hundreds of folks. We do this so folks are able to offer help, insight, and context. By reducing the scope of exposure when we're dealing with these issues filed, we're also avoiding the drive-bys. Scope and audience are vital to managing what is within your control of change and what requires tackling from multiple dependencies or groups to affect change on the scale that's required. So a great example of this is when momentum builds off of a Reddit post. Sorry. It's total coincidence. When a harassing post is made on Reddit, if it's reported to us and we don't have the bandwidth to alert on everything that's happening in Node trolling on the internet, we will try to address it. We learned the hard way with this one, though. We can reach out to moderators of Node Reddit, as an example, to work with them to rectify, but we can't force them to do anything. We can look to see if the harassers are current contributors to the project and sanction them. We can make a public statement to reiterate what we do and do not tolerate as behavior. But what we can do, if it is someone that is not invested in the project, does not generally operate in our spaces, so banning them doesn't punish them. What do we do with this drive-by harassment? We give them no platform because they are trolls and they are Kirby's of negative energy and they will be empowered by us responding. We log these users and we look for future activity in the project if they ever engage and try to bring that toxicity internal. Thanks to these experiences as moderators, we established that requests for moderation that do not appear to have been submitted in good faith with the intent to address a legitimate code of conduct violation, we will ignore it. It turns out some folks will try to manipulate your moderators to use them as an attack vector for their harassment targets. So before moderating a post, collaborators and moderation teams specifically consider the possible intent of the author, as I've just said. And we especially try to assume folks are acting in good faith. I mentioned trolls before, but we do not operate under the assumption on first look that anyone is a troll. It's possible that the author has simply made an error or is not yet familiar with the code of conduct. It may be that cultural differences exist or that the author is unaware that certain content is considered inappropriate. In these cases, we make no assumption of malintent and give the author an opportunity to correct any error that may have been made. But unfamiliarity or misinterpretations with the code of conduct does not excuse a post for moderation. Moderation team members can and will remove or block an individual from the Node GitHub org. For any removal or blocking action, an issue is describing the reasons for the action and identifying the GitHub account being acted upon must be posted to this moderation repo for all collaborators to see, with an explanation provided by us on the moderation team. Any individual blocked from the Node GitHub org will be recommended for exclusion from any Node Foundation event as well. If the author of the reporting posting disagrees that moderation is required, such as they won't edit or retract what they've been asked to, the matter can be escalated to the moderation team for resolution as well if the other collaborator's request has not been met. Moderation action should be taken, no moderation action should be taken until a decision by the moderation team is made. And I'll explain in a little bit about why we do that and don't let a single individual make that call. So, trusted folks, these are the collaborators. These are folks who are active and engaging in the project. When a post is authored by another collaborator for an issue, a potential violation, as a moderator, I must explain the justification for moderating the post, identify all changes made to the post, identify the steps previously taken to resolve the issue. If the moderation action included blocking, as I said before, we have to make sure and file an issue that demonstrates the justification for the action. Explanations of moderation actions on collaborator posts must be provided in a new post within the original thread, a new issue within the Node.js moderation repo, and any collaborator habitually violating the code of conduct or this moderation policy may be blocked temporarily or in extreme cases removed and blocked indefinitely. We don't have a 3 strikes you're out because that's not, I think, sensitive enough for the levels of interpretation that we need. So we spend time documenting this activity for educational purposes and reinforcement of values. We don't want to scare good humans away from making a mistake. Repeated mistakes with no record of listening or learning is another story. Separately, there's a lot of folks who don't hop in threads, but they're observing the modeling. Logging and action requirements hold us accountable to consistency, so moderators reduce their likelihood of being partial. This is especially vital for the folks who work together day to day, and most important when it comes to leadership in the project. So, unknown folks. These are participants who have not yet established themselves as contributors or repeated contributors to the project. When a post is authored by when a post is offered by one of them, the big difference here is that we have to dig up any history that we can find on interactions with these folks. Because we don't have a history, it is much harder for us to be able to interpret. So oftentimes, it's reaching out to the individual any way we can to talk to them privately. And then also consulting with other members of the moderation team to see if there's something that can be done, such as educating. If they don't respond in a way that feels like they are learning, then we know that what we need to do. But as part of that, because they don't have access to the collaborators' private moderation repo, we have to then try and make a decision and then make sure to log it in the public place that this person can see it. There are circumstances where we won't do that, though. So again, no moderator makes these decisions alone, and no one bears the burden of that decision alone. Historically, moderating leads to retaliation or escalation of inappropriate behavior by the individual whose post is being moderated. And I should say it can, it doesn't necessarily. This is true primarily of individuals whose intent is to harass, disrupt, or annoy an individual member of the community. In these cases, it's best to handle the moderation as quickly and as quietly as possible without drawing any further attention. This reduces the velocity and intensity of the attacks and protects the teams from emotional labor exhaustion. So, interaction limits. One of the cool tools that GitHub offers us is a cooldown. So what we do is take advantage of GitHub's temporary interaction limits. We will temporarily limit who can comment, create pull requests, and open issues among existing users, collaborators, and prior contributors. After 24 hours, the limit expires and allows the users to go back to participating in the discussion. And then we move on to temporary and permabans. A temporary block is time limited as well. The time frame is decided on by our team at the time of issuing, depending on the severity of the issue. The recommended defaults for us are 24 hours, 48 hours, and 7 days. An indefinite block is set for an unspecified amount of time and may only be lifted for an individual through a simple majority vote of the moderation team. Moderation of posts authored by non-collaborators may result in these non-collaborators being blocked temporarily or indefinitely from further participation in the org. In the case where a GitHub account appears to have been created with no intention to collaborate in good faith, we will swiftly act without following the above procedures, including removing posts, blocking indefinitely, and reporting accounts to GitHub. But again, that's after receiving +1s from teammates. Accounts that are reasonably believed to be bots are subject to immediate blocking. So we're pretty conservative on handing out permanent or temporary blocks for that matter. Temp blocks, we now log and set reminders to revisit these bans. These often tend to be viewed as longer cooldown periods where we make sure folks understand very clearly what they did wrong. I have not seen, in my history, permanent bans revisited and lifted. I don't know of an instance where we've regretted these scenarios because we are very cautious to exercise that in the first place, and multiple +1s, including the group they were interacting with, are considered. So why haven't I rehashed all of the gory details of some of our flame wars, our ravenous trolls? For one, it's all still there in issues and Twitter if you'd like to waste your energy on reading those old ghost stories. But I don't think it's good to spend energy this way. I prefer to spend energy on finding what we've made mistakes on and need to fix, and then building. We also have rules around this in Node. So any collaborator found to be violating the privacy of the Node moderation repo by repeatedly sharing or discussing details of the issues in any public forum or social media risks being permanently removed from the Node GitHub organization. And just to be clear, to be removed from that organization means you cannot contribute to Node, the project. So collaborators, maintainers, leaders, there's power in showing up and doing work on a regular cadence. In open source, because so many of us volunteer, rewards often come as accolades and a pull request, well merged after building consensus through a great release. The ones who are trusted most often have the most to lose, but can also be a win the lottery and disappear factor for the ecosystem. What if a person in these legacy groups is seen as a bad actor? This goes far beyond the moderation team's purview. What if your project doesn't have a way to address this? That doesn't mean you can't act, but it means you need to act with extreme care and intention, with excellent and consistent communication, and that includes the folks who have been reported on. How many people do you know are good at addressing elephants in the room? How about being able to look someone in the eye that you work with every day and tell them they need to stop a behavior that other groups have been, people have been enabling for years? Again, most of us aren't taught these skills. So what we know in that scenario is that it leads to a lot of people hurt, lost trust, and declined productivity. And it takes a long time to recover and instill lasting changes. So with all of this, but feeling like we had a long way to go, we called in the experts. In searching for a group that would be able to address our concerns for training, we knew we'd need folks who were trained to train and understand our globally distributed set of individuals. So it turns out this isn't as common a domain as you'd think, in spite of being this large world that we operate in. So we vetted and engaged with online peer mediation platform team, known for building conflict management programs in universities and workplace settings. They had the following credentials. So the plan is that the moderation team and leadership, including the project of the board, are the first round of trainees. So we're going through 6 modules. This is an hour and a half per week. And this is going to include reviewing materials ahead of time, as well as evaluation, discussion, role-playing, and simulations, including GitHub commenting, and practicing with feedback. And that includes, in curriculum, things like emotional intelligence, conflict style assessment for us, culture in conflict, and online conflict resolution skills, which are very unique skill set to have, of course. So then we're going to be rolling that out to the wider collaborator base, raising the level of fluency in calmly, effectively communicating through and beyond conflict with our collaborators in Node. It's a very exciting prospect, and we're really grateful to have the resources. So we have great examples, training, and are improving governance. But there's a final component missing, self-care. If you aren't a whole-rested person, how do you build others up? Moderation and conflict management take a lot of emotional energy. Each of us who volunteer in this work have to carve out time to replenish in the ways that are meaningful to us. So in the community, we talk about this. On the moderation team, we take care. So that can include therapy, meditation, exercise, having other people who hold you accountable to disengage from all of this good work. So in the tech world and in JavaScript, we like to think that we're still in the Wild West and that we're responsible for coming up with solutions because the answers don't exist. But we don't need to reinvent the wheel for our human relations problems. There are whole professions devoted to the science of making these experiences better. Great communication begins with connection. What makes us different from one another is so much less important than what makes us alike. We all long for acceptance and significance. When we recognize those needs in ourselves, we can better understand them in others. And that's when we can set aside our judgments and just hear. And yes, I just use Oprah. Sorry. But that's it. Thank you.